Hello there. I am so excited, you guys. This is episode 1 in the Bruised and Battered, a discussion series. I'm so glad you guys have joined me. I am so excited about your response to this initiative and how receptive you've been to it. You guys have been asking for links, like when does the first episode air? And here we are. It's already here. Can you believe it? So like I said, I'm just really excited to bring this to you. And I don't want to spend a lot of time explaining what I'm going to do. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to read excerpts from the book and then have a little discussion with you. I anticipate that these videos will be something in the ballpark of 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a half hour long, depending on, what it is that I'm reading and discussing. But tonight I want to start with the prologue of the book. This was probably one of the most heartfelt things that I wrote. So I want to share it with you and then talk to you a little bit about what my thoughts were as I wrote this and shared this and dedicated the book. This book is dedicated to my 4 sons. A life so full of mistakes was truly salvaged because you exist. My prayer for each of you will always be that you live a virtuous life and do right by those you choose to keep nearby. Love always, Mom. A huge, heartfelt thank you goes out to my partner in this crazy life. You have allowed me to feel vulnerable and safe at the same time. You will never understand how valuable of a gift that is. Thank you for supporting me, encouraging me, and most of all, keeping me grounded when I feel like taking flight. I love you, babe. To Debbie, thank you for encouraging me to write this book. This was not a vision I had until you encouraged me to share my story. I can never thank you enough. Let me start with Debbie. I met Debbie when I moved to Florida. She and I worked together at the very first job I had here in Florida. We were cubicle mates. We sat right beside each other. Our desks were side by side, and I fell in love with her spirit as soon as I met her. So we became friends, and as you do with friends, you share your story, right? So I had told her about my abusive marriage and how it was that I ended up to be in Florida. And so as I shared my story with her, she said, "Stacey, you really should write a book." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to write a book. You're crazy. I'm not going to write a book." So she just kept saying it. She's like, "Yeah, but you said you journal all of this, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like I still, to this day, today, I still journal." And she said, "You should write a book. Someone needs to hear your story. A lot of someone's need to hear your story." And I'm like, I'm not going to write a book. I'm not going to write a book. So what she said just kept playing in my head on repeat over and over and over again. And finally, I'm like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to take these journals and I'm going to turn them into a book. And that's what I did. All because someone planted a seed and said, "Hey, Stace, you've got a story to tell. Tell it because it can help somebody else." And so as we move forward in volume 1 of the Bruised and Battered series, I want to share that with you. I want to share with you that I'm not sharing my story for sympathy. I have not glorified any parts of my story. Everything in my book is true. These are all things that I went through. These are all things that happened to me. I didn't do this to sell books. I didn't do this to become infamous or famous. I didn't do this to be a martyr. I didn't do this to gain favor with anybody. I did this because it's my story. It was therapeutic to tell this story. And I am 100% convinced that my story will help somebody else be able to tell their story. And in doing that, there's healing, not only for me, but for the next person. And the next person, and the person that comes after that. It's a snowball effect, if you will. So thank you, Debbie, for planting that seed. You not only changed my life, but in turn have helped me change other lives and lives beyond that. You're an incredible human being, and I thank God for you every single day. The next person I want to address and thank is my partner. We are the best of friends, and we also have a very deep connection intimately. He's my significant other. This man has allowed me to feel so free in myself, has encouraged me to develop my gifts, has encouraged me to tell my story, has helped me find venues to tell my story, places to share my story. When I do presentations, he's on the road with me. He is my self-proclaimed number one fan. So get you a him. If your significant other isn't your biggest fan, you need another significant other. Honestly, I don't know what I would do without this man. I really don't. And like I said in the dedication, when I get wound, I tend to fly. I sort of let the tides take me. My highs are so high, you guys, and my lows are so low. And he has a way of just kind of helping me stay on that middle ground that I really struggle to stay at on my own. So I just need to thank him. And last but not least, the most crowning glorious achievement of my life are my 4 sons. There were times when going through this marriage and this relationship with their father that I was incredibly depressed. At least twice I was suicidal, but I could never follow through with it. Because God had other plans for me. It's just that simple. But also because they kept me accountable for my actions. I say every year at Mother's Day, it's Mother's Day and you celebrate your mother. I always feel like I should celebrate my sons because they're the whole reason that I'm a mother, right? Like, I just wouldn't be much of anything without them, honestly. I definitely went through a period of time where I was not a good mom. I was struggling to even be a good human being. And so I owe them so many apologies. I owe them just things that I'll never be able to give back to them. Time that was lost in their childhood, time that was lost in our mother and son relationship, trust that was lost as a result of bad decisions that I was making as I was navigating my way through this abusive, toxic, dysfunctional relationship. But in the end, love always prevails, and the relationship with my sons is no exception to that rule. They are my biggest motivators. They are like I said, just my most incredible achievement. Nothing will ever come close to the feeling of pride that I have when I look at them. When I watch them be parents on their own now, they've made me a grandmother 3 times. So watching them parent their own children, watching them be significant others, and just watching them watching them navigate their way through this world and make decisions and be leaders in their companies that they work for, in the organizations that they're a part of, to see how other community members relate to them. I'm proud of them. They're good people. They are truly good people. They are not without their faults. They are not without their issues. They're human, but man, they're incredible humans. I am so blessed to be their mom. I truly am. So the next thing I want to read to you is the beginning. And the beginning is not only the beginning of my story, but also the beginning of my book. So this kind of gives you a background of where I came from, how my beginning started. So let's start there. First and foremost, the accounts you are about to read are taken directly from the archives of my mind and pieced together from the various journals I've kept over the years. Some details I remember granularly, others barely at all. I should warn you, there is mention of rape, guns, child abuse, and extreme domestic violence. But I should also tell you that if you are going through this or have gone through this, You really should try to power through the accounts of violence and get to the part where I recover. Why? Because in doing so, you too are recovering. These tragedies we hold in the front of our hearts are what give us our strength. They are the very things from which we evolve. We may not know one another, but please believe me when I say, I pray for you daily. As survivors, we are part of a sorority. When you feel weak, scared, and alone, I will be here holding you up in prayer and light. If you have read this far, thank you and congratulations. You are one step closer to taking back your power. How exciting is that? That by simply reading a portion of my story, we haven't even gotten to my story. That was simply the dedication and the prologue. But by getting that far and knowing that you are about to embark on a journey that is the story of my abusive relationship, that is the story of my toxic behavior and patterns, of my horrible decisions, of my very broken past, you are healing. How incredible is that? Incredibly incredible. All right, so now let's go to the beginning. I am the oldest of 4 children and grew up in a ridiculously small town in Ohio, population 200. And before you ask, no, I didn't forget a 0 behind that number. The community I am from is a small, clearly family-oriented agricultural community. Generations of families work the same plots of land year after year. I attended the same high school as my parents and would eventually send my own children there as well. At an early age, I established myself as a very independent, my teachers called it bossy, whatever, tomato, young lady. I had no issues leading on the playground, in the classroom, or in my Bluebirds group. I was, and still very much am, a girly girl, feminine in every sense of the word. Growing up with a mom who sold Avon as well as being the first grandchild to both sets of grandparents, there really wasn't much I wanted that I didn't get. Every new baby doll, perfume, pendant, Barbie accessory, and fashion trend there was, I was most definitely sure to receive it for my birthday, Christmas, or any other gift-giving occasion. This fed my inner diva, and by the age of 12, I was well on my way to being far too fabulous for my small-town roots. I dreamt of the city, Chicago specifically. I was 15 when I visited for the first time, and I fell in love. There were so many people, and all of them were so different from me and anyone that I knew. The diversity had me completely awestruck. Over the course of the next several years, I visited the city several more times and decided firmly that that would be my location as soon as I was 18 and off to college. I would marry a handsome, educated man. We would live in a high-rise condo and host cocktail parties. I hadn't planned out what we would do to afford the lavish life I had planned for us, but at that point in time, the significance of this detail was completely lost on me. My overly romanticized fairy tale view of the world has always been my downfall. In addition to planning my new fabulous city life while I was in high school, I stayed social. I attended every home basketball game with my best friend, was active in my church youth group, loved participating in my school's musical programs, got good grades, volunteered as a candy striper at the community hospital. I played softball and did all I could to make my parents and grandparents proud. Then in August of 1991, I packed up a U-Haul trailer attached to my parents' station wagon and headed to Southern Ohio for my freshman year of college. My Chicago dream was put on hold because out-of-state tuition wasn't something my family could afford, and that was okay because I was still in Ohio, but I was 4 hours away from the small town I felt I had outgrown. Oh, the naivety of youth. I adjusted well to my new scene. I have always been outgoing and bubbly, so meeting new people had never really been an issue for me. Within a few days, I was already pretty well known for my little townhouse community. Soon there were boys knocking on my door. This attention was all brand new to me. I had a couple of boyfriends in high school, but nothing ever too serious, and it wasn't much more than a date to a dance or prom. I didn't even get my first kiss until I was 18. The boys in my high school were never really into me. But in college, my olive complexion and curvy figure was appreciated and complimented frequently. This attention came from men who I would have never imagined would have noticed me. College athletes, professors, businessmen, it was unreal. When paired with my larger-than-life persona, a vixen emerged. This new bombshell vibe was one that I happily owned. I lost my virginity within the first month of my freshman year. Now, this isn't necessarily a bragging point for me, but rather a milestone notation that illustrates where I was headed. My world was changing and I loved it. I felt like a woman. I was so happy to shed some of that good girl next door image. Little did I know, being a woman was a whole lot more than being promiscuous and popular with the opposite sex. This point became evident when I met a man named Reggie. He was dangerously good looking, tall, broad shoulders, dark mocha skin, a smile that was smoother than silk with a thick New York accent. He was the definition of eye candy. Reggie was also married, a detail he neglected to share with me. He lived off campus, but he found his way to each and every house party thrown in the student housing community. I'd seen him before, but didn't have the courage to approach him, so on this particular night, he approached me. I was already pretty intoxicated by this point. We exchanged the usual pleasantries and flirted back and forth. I asked him why he lived off campus, and he gave me a response that included the words grown man and a distinct feeling that I was asking too many questions. Probably in an attempt to shut me up and stop my incessant questioning regarding his living arrangements, he pulled me into his arms and held me tightly to his chest. He looked into my eyes as though I were the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he began kissing me. I should specify that this was a first. I had never been held or kissed or touched this way. The sensations that rushed through my body were far more intoxicating than anything I had drank that night. Soon we left the party, headed to my room, and began making out. In a matter of seconds, our clothes were strewn across my bedroom floor and our naked bodies were entwined. Reggie was very experienced, which made our encounter much more memorable and pleasurable than my first. There was non-existent music playing in my head as he did things to my body of which I had no understanding. The sensations and reactions I felt and had were exhilarating and equally terrifying. But his sexual prowess wouldn't be the only memorable part of our rendezvous. His angry, very pregnant wife beating on my door, screaming his name, and a colorful array of profanity proved to be a far more vivid memory. Up until this point, I realized I had never truly known fear. Thankfully, he was able to get dressed and out the back door before she broke through the front. He got in his IROC Z and sped off, and she was right behind him in her maroon sedan. To this day, I wince and look over my shoulder when I pass a maroon-colored vehicle. I'd love to tell you that this is where my promiscuity ends, but sadly it isn't. In fact, it gets worse. The university I attended was under construction. Part of the construction crew lived in the townhouse community where the students, such as myself, lived. They were rough around the edges, and that's putting it mildly. One of the guys, Sacco, drove a Harley that he kept parked on the front lawn of his unit. He was a storyteller. Two of his favorites were how he got his name and how many times he won big money by betting drunks in a bar or in a college housing campus that he had your name tattooed on his backside. He would simply state in a matter-of-fact tone, "I will bet you I have your name tattooed on my ass." Drunks, being the logical creatures they are, knew that there was no way that a man's derriere was big enough to have every name known to man penned on it. After a friendly wager was placed, he would pull his pants down over his hip and reveal the words, "Your name." The unusual name he went by came because he was a brawler. He didn't take gruff, and when some poor unknowing soul challenged him, he'd unleash brutal blows. If you were born much before 1975, you probably won't get the reference. But for the rest of us, think back to Batman and Robin fighting the various villains of Gotham City. Remember how 3D-like words such as pow, bam, and socko would appear on the TV screen during a fight scene? Apparently, it was a similar instance of mayhem when this man fought, prompting his friends to affectionately name him Socko. Socko and his co-workers loved to party, especially with underage college girls. It was in their townhouse that I saw someone smoke crack and snort cocaine for the first time. Everything inside of me knew I had no business there, but I couldn't lose cool points by leaving, so I stayed. I never took the drugs, although they were offered more than once. I did, however, stay drunk. One night, we ran out of beer. Sacco said he would run to the store to pick up another case and asked if I wanted to come with him. Drunk and eager, I raced to find my shoes. I hadn't been on the back of a motorcycle since I was a little girl riding with my dad and my grandpa. Not able to find my shoes, Sacco grew frustrated and threatened to leave without me, so I headed out the door barefoot. Incredulously, he looked at my bare feet and insisted I wear shoes if I were riding on his bike. Quite possibly the only responsible thing he ever did in my presence. Still unable to find my shoes, I slipped my feet into a pair of work boots sitting near the door and hopped onto the back of his bike. The boots were way too big and made my already unsteady gait even more challenged. We soared down the streets and along the Riverwalk before heading to the liquor store. The cashier took one look, and if I'm honest, probably one whiff of us, and turned us away as soon as we entered the store. The 12 beers I'd gulped along with my questionable fashion choice didn't pair well with Sacco's bloodshot eyes. He became loud and angry, and the cashier threatened to call the police if we didn't leave. We left empty-handed and took the long way home. He stopped along the Riverwalk and we got off the bike. We staggered toward a bench and he got handsy. Fortunately, after several uncomfortable giggles and me squirming away from him, he conceded and we got on the bike and headed back to the townhouse. When we returned, there were several more people there to party and a game of strip poker was in full swing. Shots of vodka and red plastic cups full of jungle juice flowed freely. It's no surprise, given the amount of alcohol I had consumed, that I don't remember how I ended up in Diamond's bed, another of the illustrious construction crew characters, but there I was, lying on the bed with 5 naked men surrounding me. I remember feeling fear, feeling regret, but most of all, feeling sick. The room was spinning, and at some point, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor, covered with a sheet. I quickly gathered my clothes, got dressed, threw up in the bathroom sink, and did the humiliating walk of shame back to my room in another building. That was the last time I partied with the construction crew. I felt dirty and embarrassed, and if I'm honest, I still do. I resolved to leave the construction crew alone. Although I was still incredibly naive, I was aware that nothing good could come from prolonged interaction with them. A few weeks later, a friend of mine invited me to a local pub. There was a garage band playing, and she was crushing on the bass player. Her roommate was dating the lead singer. Bands weren't really my thing, but I joined them nonetheless. That was the night I met my future ex-husband. He was 6'3" and 180 pounds of pure cockiness. My first impression wasn't all that favorable. Everything he said was laced with equal parts of sarcasm and rudeness. The band was terrible, and I couldn't wait to leave. Up until this point, I think you get the idea. I was a very small town girl, very sheltered, very naive, just had no idea what kind of evils, for lack of a better word, kind of existed in the world around me. And I was trying to do very grown woman things and still a very young girl's mind. And there were several times that I escaped peril by the grace of God. I will forever be grateful to leave those situations unscathed, to still be here, to tell this story. Definitely a lot of poor decisions. So yeah, that's how it started. And that's how I met my now ex-husband. So next week, we'll jump into this story even deeper and have yet another discussion about those decisions and what led me down that path. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks for wanting to know my story, for letting me tell you my story, for just being so receptive of what it is I'm trying to do. And what is it that I'm trying to do? I'm trying to spread the word about domestic violence. I'm trying to help other women who are going through or have gone through the same thing understand that you're not alone. You are not alone. I am a resource for you. I am an ally for you. And if there is anything I can do to help you, please send me a message. I'm going to link all my contact information in each one of these episodes, as well as the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That's always a resource for you as well, and they can put you into contact with agencies in your area. So please don't hesitate to use that. If you're not safe, get somewhere safe. There are resources out there. You don't have to live in fear. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. I love you, and I'll be back next week.